Now, Russia has been widely accused of indiscriminate shelling of civilian areas in Ukraine. The attacks have left many Ukrainians, including many children, with life-changing injuries. But doctors are finding ways to tackle the trauma. DW's Aya Ibrahim visited a hospital in Kyiv where a medical team has helped one little girl get back on her feet.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. For 6-year-old Marina, it's taken one to put her back on her feet.
She has grown so much during this time, since the war and everything that has happened to us. She has become very mature. She sees everything differently.
That shift started over 6 months ago, when Marina lost her leg and started treatment at this Kiev hospital. A Russian shell hit her home in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. Natalia, not wanting to add to her daughter's trauma, refused to flee the country. Instead, she moved to the capital to find a team that could give her daughter the treatment she needs. For Nazar, Marina's physiotherapist, recovery had to start from the inside.
I approached her first as a child, then as a friend, then as a patient. It was very important to set priorities. If I'd approached her immediately as a doctor, and she as a patient, we would not have had this result. You need to find an approach, and first of all, become a friend.
Then there was the challenge of finding a prosthetist who could work with someone so young.
For children, we have to pay special attention to monitoring the height of the prosthetic, so her spine does not get damaged. Her healthy leg is growing normally, so the length and volume of the prosthetic has to be adjusted constantly.
Marina also regularly meets with a psychologist who's helped her make sense of her new reality.
When Marina first entered our hospital, she asked questions. Why me? Why did this happen to me? Why my house, my family? Why my leg? She did not want to communicate with anyone. She would cover herself with a blanket and just wanted to be in her mother's arms. She did not let a psychologist near her. But then slowly, with the help of various methods, family therapy, art therapy, a rehabilitator, you can see that Marina now communicates perfectly with everyone and has fun.
Less than a year after starting her treatment, Marina can now kick a ball, walk with confidence, and jump on a trampoline. Her remarkable progress has become a point of pride and a learning experience for the all-Ukrainian team. They say that prior to the war, they didn't have many cases where they could work together in an interdisciplinary setup.
Yes, we are like one big family.
Marina is energetic. Some days she wants to be a soccer player. On others, all she talks about is race car driving. Whatever she ends up doing, her team will always be proud that they helped her take that first step.
And joining me now in the studio is DW's special correspondent, Aya Ibrahim, who filed that report from Ukraine. Aya, Marina is obviously such a tough little girl, but we didn't hear from her in your report. Why was that?
So this was actually the explicit wish of her mother and her psychologist, because they had felt that, you know, in this phase of her treatment and rehabilitation, they didn't really want anyone there, especially a stranger like a journalist. I mean, it was pretty great that we were even there and able to observe her during this training, to talk to her about, you know, what happened to her, and maybe even ask her basic questions about how she feels, because, you know, as I learned making this report, the first rule of trauma rehabilitation is do no harm. And, you know, even though we would have obviously, you know, coordinated with them what we would talk to her about, we wanted to make sure that we weren't also doing any damage by filming this report. I mean, we wanted to tell a story of rehabilitation. That was kind of my motivation for this story. That's why I was really, really interested in it. And of course, making a report about someone and never speaking to them is quite a challenge. So the next best thing was to talk to everyone around her. And you know, for me as a journalist, it was also a real lesson in how to tell a story about someone. You know, a different approach. And from that came kind of a very different story from what I expected to be telling initially, but one that I think was very worthwhile, and certainly something that I feel you don't see every day in Ukraine, reporting about Ukraine.
I mean, when we were talking earlier, we were talking, weren't we, about the fact that there was this fully functioning hospital in Kyiv and a big team around her. I mean, so many aspects to this story. What was it that sort of stood out for you or moved you most about this particular story?
I think it's how this group of people were able to find a sense of purpose in what is just an absolutely tragic situation. I mean, I've been to Ukraine, and the war has been going on for a year now. It's very difficult to tell how much longer it will be going on for. And I think psychologically for everyone who's in the country, making sense of that is difficult. It's something that's very hard to process. And I think what that group of people, you know, working with this girl, they found a sense of purpose in tragedy. And I think that's very, you know, that's powerful. And also for them, in their practice, in their careers, they told me this is just, you know, prior to the war, we weren't really able to work that way, where it's a collaborative experience. It's much more interdisciplinary. But because they had found that purpose, they were able to overcome even working habits or practices that they had had before. And that for me was really, really striking, how people were able to find sort of that project in the middle of all of the tragedy going on.
I mean, it certainly is a story that has quite a happy ending, doesn't it? But I mean, I know that there are many other children, adults waiting for prosthetic limbs. Can you give us a sense of how bad the situation is? I mean, how big is the demand for prosthetics in Ukraine right now?
I think for soldiers and people that are, you know, more in the, you know, direct combat situation, probably the situation is a lot more difficult. But actually, for Marina, I mean, what I understood from the doctors is that, you know, they were able to give her that much attention and are able to give her this much attention because most cases actually choose to go abroad. And so the demand right now for children's prosthetics specifically is not as high. And so that's why they were able to give her that attention, which ended up being, you know, a happy ending for her and her mom, who was very, very committed to staying in the country, because she told me, you know, her daughter just did not want to go abroad, and she didn't want to expose her to, you know, the added challenge of having to learn another language and so on.
So not more trauma on top of what she'd experienced already.
Absolutely.
Ibrahim, thank you so much for that.